F1 the movie is out, and technically it's an achievement in filmmaking that must be seen on the big screen. Here are several things you need to know about F1 the movie before going to see it. Hey, I'm Mike. I studied film, I work in TV, and I love movies. F1 the movie is rumored to have cost just under $300 million, which places it up there with Avatar among the most expensive movies ever made. The crew shot at 14 actual Formula One races during the 2023 and 2024 seasons across 3 continents. The shots in Dubai are particularly stunning, and there's a whole sequence in Vegas when they were racing through Vegas. F1 is directed by Joseph Kosinski, who previously directed Tron Legacy and Oblivion and Top Gun Maverick, both starring Tom Cruise. And if you couldn't tell by the scope and scale of F1 the movie, it's produced by Jerry Bruckheimer. I have to be honest, when I see Jerry Bruckheimer's name come up on the screen, I know I'm going to be getting the very best that Hollywood has to offer. He has produced some of Hollywood's biggest hits like Beverly Hills Cop, Days of Thunder, Bad Boys, Black Hawk Down, Pirates of the Caribbean, and of course, the original Top Gun and Top Gun Maverick. Bruckheimer doesn't do small movies, and F1 is not a small movie. But he does kind of do the same movie. We'll come back to that. I liked F1 for its spectacle. The camera work particularly is something to marvel at. The primary camera on F1, the movie, was the same camera they used on Top Gun Maverick, a Sony Venice. The Venice is Sony's top-tier cinema camera, the very best they have to offer. But for F1 the movie, they are utilizing brand new tech that Sony just unveiled, the Rialto extension. What makes the Rialto extension cool is it allows the body of the camera, the part doing the recording, to be separated from the lens and sensor, the part that is seeing the action. That means the bit that is capturing the image is much smaller than any of its competitors and can fit into unusually small spaces while still capturing 6K footage, which is needed for projection on cinema screens and in IMAX. Kosinski utilized the Rialto to attach the lens-sensor combo, which is only slightly bigger than a DSLR, to pan and tilt heads on the body of the F1 cars themselves. The result is cinema-quality images from the track going 200 miles an hour. The camera whip pans past competitors and is able to put us into the cockpit as a POV of the driver. We aren't just getting GoPro-style footage from the cameras mounted on the cars. We're actually getting motivated camera moves from insanely small spaces. But Kosinski doesn't stop there. He wanted to get cameras into even smaller spaces. Professional F1 cars already have cutouts for broadcast cameras inside the fins of the cars. They're all exactly the same size and weight. Broadcast cameras aren't the same quality as cinema cameras. Typically, when someone says broadcast quality, they mean 1920 by 1080. But in order to match the 6K footage, which is roughly 6144 by 3160, that they're capturing with the Sony Venice, the onboard cameras needed a major upgrade. Apple Studios asked their engineers to work with the dimensions afforded the broadcast cameras to see if they could build a modified iPhone camera in the same space. I made another video recently about how 28 years later was shot completely on the iPhone, and I said the difference between an iPhone and a professional cinema camera is negligible. And here's a case study in just how good the iPhone technology is. The production worked with Formula One race officials and mounted the modified iPhone cameras into the fins of real F1 race cars during real races to capture the highest quality race footage ever. Much of the footage in F1 comes from actual races. I dare you to watch F1 the movie and tell me which shot is filmed with the Sony Venice versus the iPhone. Mind you, the retail cost of the Sony Venice is $19,000 for just the camera body, and an additional $25,000 for the Rialto extension, not including lenses. A high-end cinema lens could run you anywhere from $40,000 to $100,000 versus the $1,500 iPhone technology. The shots within the car are some of the best race photography I've ever seen. Brad Pitt does most of his own driving, but in reality, it's not that big of a deal. Sure, he was going fast, but it's not like hanging out of a plane like Tom Cruise did. He's on a closed course with a ton of safety equipment, and the stunt drivers are absolute pros. We are in the car with Brad Pitt and the other drivers traveling nearly 200 miles an hour, taking turns, hitting guardrails. It's exhilarating. And you kind of have to be that close to the action. The broadcast cameras, as shown in Formula One races, are situated to provide a view of the track. They're above the driver's head and provide a view of the track in front of them. But for a movie, you want to be in the car and see the actors' faces. Pitt and the other actors are wearing pretty restrictive helmets. They can do little more than move their eyes in some scenes. The entire film is one big commercial for Formula One racing, and I bought into it hook, line, and sinker. So let's talk for a minute about what makes a good sports movie. In my opinion, good sports movies are one that puts you into the sport, details the challenges and the strategy, and leaves us at home with some knowledge of what it takes to perform at that level. For For example, after watching Rocky, we all feel like we know what it takes to defeat Apollo Creed. Some of us may have even taken up boxing for a bit. I don't know. Just saying. Alternatively, a bad sports movie, in my humble opinion, is one where you don't learn anything about the sport, like Boys in the Boat. Sure, it's a great story about a team of rowers that won gold at the 1936 Summer Olympics, but we don't get any insight into rowing as a sport. Nothing about stroke rate or pacing. Not enough to make us feel like we can row anyway. That said, I think F1 the movie is a fairly good sports movie. To someone like me with no knowledge of racing as a sport, they did a pretty good job of bringing me in and explaining some of the finer details. I drove home darting in and out of traffic thinking about being in someone's draft and worried about my lap time. But what F1 lacks is story. As I said earlier, Jerry Bruckheimer has brought us some of the biggest movies in Hollywood, but he isn't really known for straying too far from one or two storylines. To say I'm going to spoil this movie is like saying I'm going to spoil the end of a roller coaster ride. Spoiler, you're going to make it back in one piece. The good guy wins. The day is saved. It's Hollywood. Bruckheimer movies are all the same. They're Disney rides, they're Coke commercials, they're perfect examples of what Hollywood can do with an unlimited budget and with everyone working at the top of their game. But there are no surprises. If you saw Top Gun Maverick, you've seen F1. You know how F1 ends. You know who the character types are going to be, and you know what's going to happen. You could probably even write some of the catchphrases. Hint, Sony's way of saying goodbye is, I'll see you down the road. So let's just do this. Here's the prototypical paint-by-numbers Jerry Bruckheimer movie. Maverick, Sonny were the best pilot driver in their day, but they were arrogant and didn't want to play by anyone else's rules. They returned to teach the young version of themselves, a new arrogant hotshot, how it's done. Maverick, Sonny have to teach the young arrogant hotshot the lesson that they themselves failed to learn. Do as I say, not as I do. They're part of a team after all, and although the wise, experienced pilot driver can break all the rules he wants to, the young whippersnapper must obey and listen. In Top Gun Maverick, we had an entire movie of character development with Maverick and Goose to inform the sequel. Maybe what F1 needed was an origin story. Or maybe Sonny's character just isn't that deep. Oh, and there's a love interest. I actually really like Carrie Condon's character. She plays Brad Pitt's love interest and the first female F1 technical director, which not much is made of, because she tells us not to make anything of it. But it's in the movie, so obviously you want us talking about it. There's another woman on the crew who screws up a pit stop and is chastised for it in front of everyone, and Sonny defends her. The film takes great pains to come back to the moment between the two when she approaches Sonny to thank him, but also to tell him that she doesn't need special treatment. Okay, but again, you're telling us not to make a big deal that there's a woman on the pit crew by telling us not to make a big deal about the woman on the pit crew. It was so out of place that I wondered if F1 as a sport is trying to court female viewers. Or is the film giving the girlfriends of the F1 dudes who dragged them to the theater to see this some red meat? I don't know. Bruckheimer films, and Top Gun specifically, are not really known to handle women in these stereotypically men's world well. And my advice is, if you can't address the situation with something meaningful to say about it, then don't address it at all. The first 15 minutes or so of the film at the 24 Hours of Daytona were some of the best cinematography I have ever seen. In the theater I saw it in, someone yelled out, "Fuck yeah!" which I think was an appropriate reaction. The stakes here in F1 just aren't as high as they were in Top Gun. There is more than one scene where Sonny is asked directly why he does this. Why is he back? What's at stake? Almost as if the screenwriter is asking, channeling himself through his characters to find out what is the motivation of his main character. We don't fully know because Sonny doesn't fully know. We get some half-assed monologue about how Sonny feels when he's behind the wheel, but we need to know all of that, feel all of that from the very beginning of the movie. Not right at the end before the big race. What we're told is that he's a gambler and is living out of his car and traveling from race to race. We assume it's to make ends meet, not because he got some highfalutin idea about how he feels when he drives. There's even mention of Sonny's father, who was a pit mechanic himself. That could have been his inspiration. His father dies when he's young, and all he wanted to do was show his dad that he had what it took to become great. But nope, that gets mentioned and ultimately unaddressed also. Emotionally, it's as ankle deep as most of the dudes who will probably turn out to see F1 the movie. The silent, stoic types who communicate through Hallmark cards that they simply sign their names to. I can't even spoil the ending because I don't fully understand the loophole in F1 rules that enabled the come-from-behind win. In fact, when the ruling is made and subsequently explained to newbies to the sport, like me, Sonny's teammate's mother, a woman of a certain age with probably as much knowledge of the sport as I have, says, "That doesn't make sense." Yes, Mrs. Pierce, I agree. That doesn't make sense. F1 the movie will probably rake in millions of dollars and was designed to get people back into theaters. Like I said, Jerry Bruckheimer doesn't make small movies, and F1 is meant for the big screen. So go out and see it in theaters while you can. I read that it'll be released for at least 30 days because you know Apple wants F1 to be streamed on Apple TV as soon as humanly possible. Overall, if you're a fan of Top Gun and Jerry Bruckheimer films in general, you're going to love F1 the movie. Get yourself a big bucket of corn and lean back in those theater recliner seats and enjoy. Once again, these are my opinions. I'd love to read your opinions on F1 the movie in the comments below. Film is about community. I'm Mike, and I love movies.